Hi. I'm probably talking to a lot of nobodies right now because I only announced this, I think, at around 4 o'clock this morning. But I'm coming back to do my Facebook Live videos, which were actually getting quite popular before all of my other readings started taking over. But there is so much worth in getting stories and education out and knowledge out on the kind of work that I and a lot of other people do. In the medical and in the metaphysical realm. Anyway, welcome back. And welcome myself back. Today, I just figured I would start, I usually like to sort of talk about things in the medical and the metaphysical, more of like a story to tell you really about the cases. All cases that I do talk about really do, I get permission from anybody who does. I will not name names. I live in New York City, and a lot of these people might be people of note. And just in general, privacy is really important out there. On the basis of net neutrality. Anyway, that being said, today I'm going to talk about reading friends, and loved ones, which is, a lot gets in the way of this. Emotionally, how clearly you read, where you put your ego. And then I'm going to segue into that on a reading I did for a dear friend about Hashimoto's disease. And really, more than Hashimoto's disease is how very often my work will correlate with making a diagnosis that comes from traditional Western medicine, and how these things really should be worked together. This is very important. We don't really think about that, and I could not do the amazing work I do without doctors with more open mind and understanding that our medical structure isn't always exactly what we need all the time, and that we forget about hi, Mina. And we really forget about, other things that have to do with life, the stresses, the vibration, the energy. To start off, a dear friend of mine had bought a reading for a friend of hers who was not getting to it, I think was a little freaked out, was not really embracing of the metaphysical work yet. It took her a minute to sort of absorb it. And she had Graves' disease, which I could read pretty clearly from her. But my friend instead decided to take the reading for herself. A lot of life things going on, and she tackles with a lot of health issues. She was the one diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease. Now, getting back to the friend relation, hi Mandana, and hi Tommy. And getting back to sort of like the reading of friends. Before I read anybody, I will often ask, should I be reading them? I do trust that anybody who comes my way is due for reading and should be, but you never know. And I have to sort of sit in with myself as far as friends go and say, can I really unbiasedly read this person? And this friend is a particularly close friend. I see her often. Our lives are a bit intertwined. So I really had to think pretty closely on it. And really wonderfully, because I have read for her, she would ask me some questions about business and life and things, and I could read her pretty clearly on the moment. But sitting down to a formal one, I didn't know how it would sit. But immediately, I felt a direct attachment from the situation, which is a great sign, which means I've sort of separated my emotion, my ego, with in fact, sort of a professionalism that I hold very sacred within my metaphysical work. So one of the interesting things that came up with reading for this friend, for today I'm going to call her Sue. For Sue, was that the night before I will often read a little bit into if I know I have something scheduled for the next day. And then, of course, right before the reading, I will always take the 15 to 20 minutes to sort of like keep that space sacred for the client that's about to walk in the door or on the Skype or anything like that. So the minute that I sort of had that night before reading that I did for her, something really rang true. I knew that she had been diagnosed with Hashimoto's disease. Now, Hashimoto's disease is an autoimmune disease. It affects the thyroid. The thyroid is a sort of butterfly-shaped gland right here. It affects our metabolism. It affects our sex hormones, or hormones are sexual, by what? And what happens with Hashimoto's disease is that we call it almost like an allergic or autoimmune thyroid. And actually, it causes the thyroid to get very high and then very low and then very high, and then it settles on low. That being said, it sort of ends up sort of eating itself. It's sort of like the body almost becomes allergic to the actual gland, theoretically. For my not so medical and my little more spiritual friends out there, it is more of, it comes from an inability to express the needs and wants of the person. Now, interestingly, she did not read, but she did not feel initially. I'll get a feeling and then I'll sort of read into the body. And the night before, she did not at all feel like somebody with Hashimoto's. And it sort of, I was going to bed when it happened, and I sort of shot up and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to start reading now. So I ended up sort of sitting up in bed, and I thought to myself, she does not read for Hashimoto's at all whatsoever. I could understand why the doctor that diagnosed her said that she did, for sure. She definitely ticks certain boxes. She had some thyroid issues before, but there was an exhaustion that came to her. There was an overall feeling of ill feeling. I want to say a little gut issue, but also physically, she did not manifest any of the typical signs. There's often a swelling in the neck, a lack of definition, and she did not come across with any of these things at all. Not that that means anything, because plenty of people have things and you can't see it, for sure. I think we see this a lot in autoimmune, especially like endometriosis and that sort of thing. But the pain of it is really quite intense, and the discomfort of it is intense, obviously. But deep down, I did not feel that she had this. So I actually was pretty late. I ended up calling the doctor that I work very closely with, Dr. Lisa Vila, and who she actually knew. And I said, you know, I'm reading this, and I don't read that she has Hashimoto's. I see why, but I don't read that she has. And actually, Dr. Vila had seen Sue before many times, and she agreed. She thought it was an odd diagnosis for her. But, you know, you never know. She was not the last doctor to see her. Next day, she comes in for the reading, and I say, I said, first thing out of the gate, I have to tell you, I do not see that you have Hashimoto's disease, and that you're actually being treated quite differently. Only half the supplements that you're taking are really doing the effective job, and I don't see that your thyroid's not working. And she said, actually, my thyroid is working. And that she was sort of feeling also that she was not with Hashimoto's. Now, the interesting thing about this whole thing, and we're going to get a little bit more groovy on this one, is that a lot of the work that she needed was actually more energetic work. It was a lot of hands-on work. The more, I believe, the more sort of spiritual you allow yourself to be, the more manifesting you do physically. And with her, this was definitely the case. I see this a lot in autoimmune cases, especially because physically we tick so many boxes. And the fact is that realistically, what we really needed to do for Sue was have her come in. It was a little bit more, I want to say, acupuncture, Reiki-based, hands-on, and also there is a bit of, I think we sort of physically and health-wise, in the same way that we feel great relief once we get to a doctor, we are diagnosed and know what it is that is wrong with us. We know in our gut when they're right. I'm always relieved if I've been sick and I get to a doctor, even with a flu. I feel always so much better about it. And that being said, we manifest differently our illnesses when we are unsure, or it is not completely covered, much like this Hashimoto's case, because it still seemed to her, even though she was very confident in her doctor, too much of a mystery. Not that she wouldn't trust, but Sue really sort of knew in her gut that something else was going on. And when she had gone back, her thyroid was working really well, was working really, really well. So, and she had no other signs thereof. So that is one of the big cases sort of that I'm dealing with right now, because now we have to sort of find a way to both go back to the doctor, because I never say to a client / patient, if I'm working with a doctor, to stop seeing the other doctor. I think I'm in full belief that everything needs to be used together, both Eastern, Western, and spiritual medicine, because I couldn't do without the knowledge that they have, and for the doctors, as I say, who are open-minded enough to sort of let me take a look at a patient. They need to, we need to use each other in this case. So I'm going to be sort of following that online quite a bit right now with Sue. Sorry, it takes me a minute because Sue's not her real name, and I have to really think about it when I move ahead with it. That being said, hang on, I have a couple questions here, but a lot of them I've answered before. Okay, somebody had just emailed me a question. Yes, I am doing my regular readings. I do regular psychic readings, and I also, but my strength and the bulk of my business right now is the medical work. I do pretty much any kind of medical work that will allow me to go near a client or a patient. I do both on my own, and I work with doctors. The most recent, actually, the most recent case that I have, which is a pretty big one, was actually a young boy of 11 who's 4 years ago had a tumor removed from his spine. Now, the interesting thing about this tumor, and it does matter actually where a tumor grows from and towards, which is something that I learned very recently from Dr. Avila, who specializes in kinesiology. Had one removed 4 years ago. At the time that they had caught it, it was in his spine, and it was almost as wide as his spinal column. It was coming from within it. It wasn't outside of it. And now it's back. He doesn't, obviously, there was not, they are scheduled for another surgery. We are trying to hopefully work around it so there's not another surgery. Now, the amazing thing about this case, and I'll probably talk about it next week more in detail, is that through our work we found out that this tumor is hormone reactive. Now, the great thing about something being hormone reactive is that we can control the hormones in the body naturally and faster than we can really control other things with very natural supplements, easily diet. Hormones in your body can shift and change really out of nowhere quite easily. So we're very excited about this. Now, the clincher with this one, the clincher with this whole thing is that he has surgery scheduled for the 26th, and there is a scan that is going to happen on the 19th. So we're sort of keeping our fingers crossed that maybe with a lot of alignment and sort of the shifting of the hormones, we can decrease substantially this tumor before he goes in for the scan. Like any other situation, as I said earlier, I would never ever ask a family to sort of change the date of a surgery like that. But in this situation, and no, I did not ask them to, it's important to sort of stress that surgeons are here to help us to take things out or put things in. They're not really here to tell us why things happen. And in this case, the surgeon did say, we never know why tumors grow. Now, we do know why tumors grow. And really the basis for this one, if we cannot sort of stop the progress of it, is to sort of make sure that this never happens again. That, I mean, ideally, we would love for this boy to have only one surgery, had it been, and it was the one 4 years ago. And we are working really hard right now to work with the boy and the parents to maintain that he does not have another surgery. Recommendations that I made as far as health goes, very, very important, lack of soy, because soy is a phytoestrogen and does mess with the estrogen in the body, or all hormones in the body, both estrogen and testosterone. Remember, this is a boy of 11, 12. He is not showing any signs of obvious puberty at the moment, but it's still the age. It is effective. It is no surprise that this tumor came back at this time. The other thing also was, after so much abuse to his body from the original surgery, because remember, when we go through surgery, it is invasive, and it really does take a long time. And we're talking about, 4 years ago, this child was 7, 8 years old, major surgery, anesthesia, and every time he went in for an MRI, he was scared, so they also gave him a sedative. Affects the gut, and then once we affect the gut, you end up with a candida infection. And that was really important for us because we really want the rest of his body to work at optimal pace. We're approaching this both in a way that we would love to avoid surgery, but we would also, in the best possible situation, if he still does have to go in for surgery, if those decisions are made, that he go in with the strongest constitution we could possibly get him to for both going in, because you are a bag of nerves when you go in for surgery, and a small child who has gone through this again, it definitely it really upsets the nervous system, and also to the optimal for recovery, super important. So we're really working with that as well. I think that is probably a case that deserves its own our TV show at this point. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that, or may everybody keep their fingers crossed for this child to not have to go into surgery. And we're really hoping that on the 19th of June, we show absolutely, maybe if the world demands, no tumor at all. Anyway, on that note, this was just a test run, and way more people tuned in than I ever thought. So I want to thank everybody. I will be far more prepared next week. It will be, I think, every week at 10:30 on Tuesday. You may ask questions. If you need me to read in the moment, I can do that too. So if you have questions about what I do or something going on with you or any help, please let me know. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Have a great day.